This is Anna. Anna is so fam, so sis, and we've been working on creating a stronger awareness, getting her hand back to normal. And as you can see here, there's a bit of a scar on her hand, and it's still kind of tender to the touch. My bad. And if you don't mind explaining, because this looks way better than than it did a couple months ago, especially. But what happened to your hand?
It looks better than expected in general, than we expected it to turn out.
For sure.
A wave knocked me off my feet while I was on a tide pool. Just massive amounts of rock. And as it swept me off my feet, something came over me and I anchored my hand into the ground so that I wouldn't get swept away. And I looked up and I didn't even notice it. I was just covered in blood. I got pretty scarred up, and finally after a minute I looked down at my hand and the whole thing was just busted open. So I got 6 sutures, stitched it all up, and it was in stitches for 18 days. And then I took them out and
yourself.
And it's been quite a process.
Yeah, sweet, for sure. Yeah. And if you don't mind, the entire time you had your this injury, how were you holding it? What position were you holding it in?
So from the moment the injury happened, my hands were in the cup, like this. And it stayed in this cup literally for like the first 2 weeks. And my fingers were so swollen just from the injury that I mean, I couldn't really even move them like this, and they were so swollen and just puffy that I couldn't even bend them like this. And I was fearful that like I wasn't gonna get my finger movement back because I quite literally could not move them because there was so much fluid in my hands. And it started with just being able to kind of straighten them out, and then over time just kind of moving it a little bit, but the skin was just so tight because the cut was so deep, and they really had to pull my skin back on over. And so the tightness of the scar and just the sutures in general made it really hard to move my fingers because of the pain. So we just now really started stretching the skin out again.
And were you like experiencing any pain in your elbows, your wrists, anywhere else, or just the hand itself?
Yeah, I had elbow pain at the beginning. You can't really see it because I've been taking good care of the scar. But yeah, after I got out of the hospital, I told them my elbow hurt really bad, but they didn't expect it. They or inspect it. They said it was normal, and then I get in the car afterwards, and my elbow's covered in blood, and I had a really huge bruise here. But yeah, so I had elbow pain just from the bruising of falling on that. Honestly, I don't know how that got scraped. Like, so the whole time, again, like with the straightening my arm, like forget moving my fingers, it was hard just to straighten my elbow because it was already always tensed up. And like even now, because of the way that my elbow and hand have been crunched up, like throughout the day, I just randomly go like this, and just a simple turn of the shoulder literally cracks my back. Just getting it back into alignment.
If I remember correctly, it also kind of like made you feel as if like movements like yoga and things that you like to do, you couldn't really enjoy them as much. And I remember specifically there was a particular movement that you tried to do.
Because I know there's so many variations of yoga, but I really like vinyasa flows and more power yoga, and always going down in vinyasas. Like that's my thing. I'll just do it for several minutes at a time, or just rest in downward dog for minutes at a time throughout the day. And the fact that I couldn't do that and I couldn't even straighten out my hand, it's the longest I've gone without doing it in the past 2 years. So that was over 2 years and more than that. So that was really, really tough, and I've seen my body expand and the effects of that. But yeah, that had me in tears that I couldn't do it. I tried to put the weight on my fingertips so that I wasn't like straightening out the skin, but the second that I tried to straighten out the skin, or like one day I tried to do a push-up and had my palm splats, it even hurts a little bit. And then it just hurts the rest of the day, feeling like it's tearing open.
So I'm actually glad you brought that one up, because the push-up one was the one that hurt me the most, because I think it was downward dog you were trying to do at one point, the downward dog, And then you did the downward dog and you told me how much pain it was in, and I was like, okay, there's variations you can do for it. Try this, and then you did it. The next day I saw you doing yoga, all good. And then a couple days later you told me you did the push-up, and that's when I was like, oh shit, because you told me your hand was hurting for a couple days. So that's where I kind of got hurt, because I'm like, oh fuck, I'm actually a movement coach. We're living in the same house. There's no reason you should be in the amount of pain that you should be in, when I know that I can help. And I mean, yes, you have your own process, which is something I also had to understand. Like, you kind of had to go through what you went through to understand your body, like, on your own. So that same night, I stayed up, like, very late, just kind of creating a program. And one of the movements, one of the 5 movements we did, the first one was, I believe, the wrist cars I programmed for you. So if you can really quickly show me what the wrist card was. Yeah. And there you go, the nice pop already. So the wrist cars, specifically, when you look at the anatomy of the wrist. So looking at the anatomy, you can see all the tissue that's wrapped around the fingers and the wrist. When we layer over muscles, you can see how many muscles actually insert over, beyond, and past the wrist, from the front side to the back side. If you look at all these different tissues, you can see how many and the roles that they play and how they pass over and insert into the wrist. The reason I chose wrist cars is because we're hitting so many different muscles, and we're also creating more space within the joint themselves. So look at all the different muscles that attach over, around, and within the wrist. It becomes very intricate, and that is why we chose wrist cars to start. So the wrist is in this position. All right, it's only in this position. So tissue will build around, along the sides that are not being moved. The body's very intelligent. The body will save energy because it does not want to waste energy. So if you're not using it, you will surely lose the ability to do it. So the first thing I knew off the bat, we had to focus on rotational movements to open up more, to create more space so she can have more range of motion to move throughout the entire movement. So the wrist was the first thing I thought about. The second thing I thought about was, if you could show, the finger lift-offs.
Not very good at these ones.
And all she's doing is lifting off the fingers. Because when you look at the anatomy of the back of the hand, you'll see there's only a select few muscles that actually work to fully extend the fingers back. One being the extensor digitorum, the extensor digiti minimum, and then the extensor indicus muscle, smaller muscle that you can see right here. Focus primarily on creating more tension within these muscles, because these muscles were being lengthened the entire time to create way more contractions in here, way more awareness, being that the hand was in a cup position and these muscles were lengthened. All right. Then I also looked at, when you flip your hand over, because it was in a cup position, it was very closed in, right? I mean, the third thing I decided to program in was the grip flexions and extensions. So she will hold her hand as tight as she can, tightening her fist, preferably holding onto like a ball or something, and moving the wrist back and forth, creating tension inside the palm of the hand. Not only is it strengthening up the wrist, but it's also creating a stronger grip strength. So that way, if she does decide to hold her hand in that palm position again, she is strong enough to do it. And because it was in that position, we're going to teach you how to be strong in that position. All right. Another one of the movements, because I know that she was getting elbow pains because the muscles in the forearm, when you look at the anatomy of it, you'll see a lot of the muscles that work to flex and extend the wrist, and they insert into the wrist from the elbow. And there's many muscles, there's many groups. So when we did these wrist flexion and extensions while holding something, we were trying to create tension throughout the entire forearm. Because when you look at some of these muscles, like this flexor digitorum profundus right here, you'll see it goes directly into the hand. The tissue inserts into the hand. So flexion, extension. So doing the elbow cars now, you'll see we focus primarily on the extension and flexion, and the pronation and supination, which is the turning of the elbow. Because her hand was stuck in this cup position, elbow close to the body, we have to create more rotation throughout that elbow. Also forgot to mention one more movement that we did was the finger spreads. Decided to take her fingers and go ahead and do the finger spreads, and simply just spread them apart. Literally. Because when you look at the anatomy of the finger, so when you get a closer look at the muscles that are intricately in between the fingers, you see that each of them are responsible for their group of joints that they pair up with to abduct them out. But then you look at the extensor digitorum. This comes in from the elbow over the hand to help assist with abduction. So you could imagine if you're having difficulty abducting your hand, the pain that would go directly up into your elbow for lack of movement. You would see that these muscles needed to be expanded more to create more range of motion. So that way, what she was feeling as tightness in the skin needed to be worked a little more because her body got used to being in that cup position. So we took these steps. We've been drilling it. She's been doing it twice a day, every day. And I mean, it looks a lot better than I've seen it. And so, yeah. That is the update on her hand. We'll keep going through it, keep you guys updated. We'll create more movements to then advance these things. And yeah, how's your hand feeling as opposed to like maybe last week?
It feels a lot better. And because I've been working it now, it constantly feels like, as of yesterday, like it's kind of cramping where I'm like always wanting to stretch it now. Just to, to move it. And I'm finding my own movements with it too, just finding often like there's a necessity to always keep it moving to be comfortable. And the best thing that she said is she is finding her movements, finding her own way. So we create the program for you, but ultimately it's more just something for you to build off of, for you to learn your own body, because now she's gonna have a much stronger awareness of her entire body, of her hand, of how it moves, of what it wants. She's creating such a strong awareness now, her tissue will literally talk to her and tell it what it needs. Cramping as well as neurological confusion, it just means your body isn't used to being there, so it's trying to protect itself. So she understands that the cramping is a normal thing, so you'll work through the cramp and you'll start to gain way more control over your body, over the ranges of motions that you have, and over every single aspect of what you do with that hand. So thank you, Nana. This has been a pleasure, and we'll keep you guys updated. Thank you. Seriously.